Jakks Pacific. You either love them or you're a Jazzwares fanboy. Jakks is personally my favourite Sonic figure producer, and I thought it would be fun to scour the internet for at least 20 minutes and find some wish lists people had made and review my thoughts on the figures they wanted. Let's get into it. Before we get into the tier list, I want to lay down some ground rules. First off, while the likeliness of each figure happening will be included, it will not actually make any difference to where it's ranked. It's purely on how much I want it to be a thing. Secondly, most characters on this list are either from IDW or the games, so unfortunately, Snively will not be making the list. My apologies to all 4 Snively fans out there. Third and finally, all rankings are my opinion, so if you personally prefer Orbot and Cubot to Rough and Tumble and I don't, please don't come and burn down my house with pitchforks. I would really appreciate it. Speaking of Rough and Tumble, they're starting off this list at the bottom of the least wanted tier. Now, before I'm attacked for this opinion, I would like to clarify, I do really like IDW. It's much better than the Archie comics in my opinion, and that's another thing that's going to get me killed, but that's a whole other can of worms I'm not opening today. I just want to say that
I did not care for
Rough and Tumble. That's all I really have to say about them. I don't dislike them by any means, but they just don't really do anything for me, and I especially wouldn't want merchandise of them. And with that, they're being placed strongly at the bottom of the worst tier. Following up Rough and Tumble are the Deadly Six. Now, like Rough and Tumble, I actually have nothing against the Deadly Six, it's just they don't really do anything for me. I haven't played Lost World, and their appearances in IDW just weren't that interesting to me. I can understand why some people would want the 7 Deadly Six as figures, especially since Tomy did make a Zavok and then we never got any of the rest, but for me, I just don't really care. And with that, they're being put in the bottom tier. Following up the Deadly Six, we've got Tom Wachowski, the cop from the Sonic movies. Okay, I know he's a weird inclusion, but I really wanted the list to hit 40 characters. Plus, there was one person on Reddit who said they wanted Tom as a figure. Now, do I think he's likely to get a figure? No. Would I want a figure of Tom? Also no. However, I would still pick up a Tom figure before I ever picked up Rough or Tumble or the Deadly Six. And that is why Sheriff Thomas Michael Wachowski is going in the bottom tier above the Deadly Six. Rounding out the bottom tier is Mimic from the IDW comics. While I do like Mimic as a character, I enjoy his appearances in IDW, and he is definitely likely now that they're doing the comic collection of figures. I just wouldn't pick him up if he was a figure, or at least he wouldn't be my priority. I also feel like they may struggle to translate him into 3D without losing points on articulation. And with that, he can be placed at the top of the least wanted tier, and we can move on to the meh tier. Starting off the meh tier strong are more Badniks. Now, I really do like Badnik figures, however, I don't think it would be the end of the world if Jakks decided they never wanted to make one again. However, I feel it's much more likely that they're going to make loads more Badniks before they ever lose the license. And with that, the Badniks are being placed at the bottom of the meh tier. Joining the Badniks are Orbot and Cubot. While I do actually quite like Orbot and less so Cubot, and I would actually really like figures of them, I feel like it's not as necessary for Jakks to make them, as you could always just buy the Tomy ones, but I wouldn't be opposed to Jakks making an Orbot and Cubot. I also do think it's quite likely they will end up making an Orbot and Cubot in the 2.5 inch line, but when they will is a completely different story. And they now join the Badniks in the meh tier. Following up Orbot and Cubot is Vanilla the Rabbit. I would say I'd be as excited for a Vanilla figure as I would be to hear that Orbot and Cubot got announced. She just doesn't really do anything for me, as I would consider her quite a minor character. Obviously, she's Cream's mum and Vector's like potential love interest, but I don't really think that warrants her getting a figure, let alone me being interested in one. And that's why Vanilla is joining the meh tier. Next up we have the Coco from Sonic Frontiers. Now while I really do like Frontiers, it's honestly one of my favourite Sonic games, and maybe one of my favourite games in general. I wouldn't really want the Coco as figures. Like, it would be cool, they'd match well with the Chow, but there's also not a lot they could do with them. Even if it comes to variants, like, they'd just do the basic ones with different leaves, and that's not that exciting in my opinion. And that's why they're ranked so low. Next up we have Froggy, Big's best friend and pet. While I do like Froggy and I would be interested in having him as a figure, in fact we actually just got a version of him released with the Metal Virus Sonic. But to an extent I feel like it's too little too late, because they've already released Big and he was released without Froggy as his accessory, and I don't think many people would buy Froggy as a single figure. And that's why he's rounding off the meh tier. We're off to a strong start with the give or take tier with a Super Shadow re-release. Super Shadow is a figure that was released 14 waves ago in Wave 4 and has never been re-released. And the figure that was released was plagued with issues, and yet somehow he still goes for about £100 in box. I completely understand why people at the minimum want a Super Shadow re-release and at most want a complete redo of him, because he's very poorly made since he was so early on. However, I definitely think there are much better figures I'd rather Jakks make first. And that's why Super Shadow is starting off the give or take tier. Moving swiftly on, we have the rest of the hard-boiled heavies. I have no doubt in my mind that Jakks will eventually make the rest of the hard-boiled heavies. After all, they've already made Heavy King and Heavy Gunner. It would be stupid to not finish it off. Then again, they released Jet 5 waves ago, and they never bothered to release the rest of the Babylon Rogues. I would definitely like to finish off the rest of the hard-boiled heavies, but like Super Shadow, there are many other figures I'd rather have first. And that's why they're going just above Super Shadow. Next up, we have seasonal variants. Now, we do of course already have some seasonal variants with Christmas and Easter figures, but I feel like they could do a lot more, such as Halloween. There's so much Sonic Channel art of different costumes for different occasions that they could easily make a bunch of figures for every single one, but they just haven't bothered. And while I wish I could say I believe they will, I honestly don't think they're gonna happen anytime soon. They seem quite happy to just have the Christmas ones re-release in the advent calendars every year. And with that, they're going just above the hard-boiled heavies. Following up the seasonal variants is Dr. Starline from the IDW comics. There are spoilers in my reasons for not wanting him, so skip ahead if you don't want to hear them. But I don't think Jakks is going to make him, at least not anytime soon, because he's dead. He died in the comics. And that also makes me not that interested in having him. I think most other IDW characters would be more exciting to get a figure of. And because of that, he's going just above the seasonal variants. Next on the list is Marine the Raccoon. Now, I was very mixed on having Marine as a figure at first, but I kind of changed my mind when I realised that she'd pair really well with Blaze, and that sold me on the idea of getting Marine as a figure. She'd obviously be the same scale as Cream, but I don't see it happening, at least not anytime soon. I just don't think they care enough to make her. And so she's going just above Dr. Starline. Next up is Styx the Badger. Now, I've never played the Sonic Boom games, but I did quite enjoy the TV show, with Styx being probably my favourite character a lot of the time. And while it probably wasn't likely at first, now that she's been made canon as of Frontiers, I feel like there is a chance we might get a figure of her at some point by Jakks, and I would not be opposed to it. So she sits right in the middle of give or take. After Styx comes Bean and Bark. The reason these guys aren't higher is because my favourite of the trio is definitely Fang, but it would still be great to get Bean and Bark to have the trio complete, and I definitely do think they're quite likely, especially since we just got Fang. And with that, they're being placed just above Styx. As we get closer to the wanted tier, the characters are definitely getting more interesting. and we're following up with the Babylon Rogues. Now, I haven't even played Riders, and I'm honestly not the hugest fan of the Babylon Rogues, but I completely understand why a lot of people want the set to be completed, as we already got Jet in Wave 13. I definitely wouldn't be opposed to picking them up if they do get made. I definitely do think they're likely, it just might take a while to get them all. Same with the hard-boiled heavies in my eyes. And with that, they're being placed above Bean and Bark. Following up the Babylon Rogues is Jewel the Beetle from the IDW comics. Now, I'm a big fan of Jewel as a character. I really like her design as well, and I think she'd look really good as a figure. However, there are a lot of characters, especially from IDW, that I'd much rather have before I got a Jewel figure. I'd also argue she's one of the less likely characters to get figured, just because until recently, she hasn't been that important of a character, especially compared to some of the other IDW originals. And with that, she's going above the Babylon Rogues. While the next two entries are separate entries on the list, due to the fact that they are linked, I will be ranking them together. And they are E117 Sigma and Scrapnik Mecha Knuckles. Both of these characters appeared in the IDW miniseries Scrapnik Island, and it's personally my favourite miniseries they've released to this day. Unfortunately for them, I much prefer, and therefore they're greatly overshadowed by, the Scrapnik Mecha Sonic. This is why they're in the tier that they're in. They could have been higher if Scrapnik Mecha Sonic just didn't exist. And with that, they're rounding off the give or take tier. Moving swiftly on to the wanted tier, we have... Sorry to interrupt, but this video is unfortunately a two-parter. It would have been way too long if I tried to fit it all into one video. The good news is the next part is dropping a week from now, so make sure to leave a like and a comment on this video and subscribe with notifications on so you can be informed when the second part comes out. And that's all for this video. Peace.